Welcome to The Brooklyn with Pooch and Colin. My name is Colin Helwig, Brooklyn Nets beat writer for NetsDaily. We're clocking in for episode number 32 of the pod today. I know it's been a little while since you've heard from us. I was knocked out with the flu for a bit, then the holidays hit. I actually took a trip out to Colorado to do some snowboarding, but all those things kind of hit at the same time. So first off, we apologize for the lack of content. However, I am back. The Nets are back kind of in their own way, and Tyler Carmona is here to chat with me as well. Tyler is one of our new guys this year at NetsDaily, but he also does some work for Sports Illustrated. Tyler, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Good, man. No, happy to be on. Obviously, been listening to the pod for a while, so happy to join you guys now.
Of course, man. We're happy to have you. Before we get into anything, Tyler, what's your New Year's resolution, man?
My New Year's resolution, is this a Nets related resolution or a life related resolution?
Whatever you want, my friend.
Well, I guess this can relate to both. More to be unbothered more, kind of let things slip off.
Dude, that is a good one. That's one Nets Twitter needs maybe more than air right now. Oh my god.
What was yours?
Dude, I haven't even got that far yet. I'm just to fall down less when I'm snowboarding. I went into that trip, and one there was no snow. I went to Breckenridge, so it was just like this was my first trip out west. I really thought it would be, what everyone talks about, like East Coast skiing, snowboarding is like no fun, but the West, it's great. There was just no snow there, and on top of that, it had been 3 years since I had been snowboarding, and I just thought I could just jump right into it, and I took some serious tumbles. So that was I guess patience is my New Year's resolution, and to not eat so much shit in the snow.
That's good. At least you made it out. No injuries. It can get a lot worse than that.
You're right. You're right. And that's know all about that. Maybe not this year, but certainly in years past. All right, so let's get into the news. The Nets are 500 in their last 10 games. I'm recording this here on Tuesday night. And most recently, they got one in a revenge game with Michael Porter Jr. against his old team. MPJ, he's really just can continue to hoop. Tyler, what's impressed you the most that you've seen about Michael Porter Jr., whether you're watching at home or, on the beat at games?
I would say efficiency and maturity, kind of like a combination of the both. They go hand in hand. We expected him to be an offensive weapon, obviously, like we knew what he was capable of. But I think the last time we saw him kind of be a team's primary scorer, he was capable of doing so many different things that his body won't let him do now. So it was impressive how he's been able to adapt and kind of change his game while also not just being a shot chucker. Like he's shooting, I think, 49.5% among the top 20 scorers in the league. That's one of the most efficient, and he's also managing to do it while also being a solid rebounder. He's at like 7 rebounds a game. I think only Luka and Jokic, among the top scorers are doing that. So I guess, like I said, we expected him to score. We knew what he was capable of in that aspect, but he's just kind of been more impressive all around. And also, beside the podcast episodes and stuff, the podcast appearances, just in terms of his general dealing with the media, very mature. And it's frustrating to be part of a rebuilding team, but he seems to take it in stride, and he seems to be, like, at least basketball-wise, a good mentor for the young guys.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of the stuff he said, especially coming out of the Denver game. He said it and it made sense, but I think we kind of forgot. Before he had the back problems, he was seen as a top 5, top 10 like talent coming out of that draft. And like it makes sense that one, he has this confidence to play like one of the I think he said, I think I could have been, I'm going to be the best player in the league, or I could be, or that was his mindset. And that makes sense. Like injuries suck, and that totally took him off or bumped him down the board. But I remember going into that draft, and I don't remember if the Nets had a pick or if the Nets were further back. And I just remember thinking it for the Nets, and when the Nuggets did get it, I was like, this could be an absolute steal, because Steph Curry had like ankle issues and then became Steph Curry. Like every prospect who has a question mark about an injury, it's a question mark until they prove that's no longer holding him back. And I'm not saying he's the best player in the world right now, like he hoped to be, but he's certainly looking closer to that level than he ever has in his career.
I agree. I mean, at the very least, being an all-star caliber player is a good consolation prize. He may not be that perennial superstar he was capable of being, but he's, capable of being, I think, a very, like, going back to what you mentioned, him talking about his time at Denver, and he handled it in a very mature way where that's one of the best teams in the league, but that also doesn't mean he can't be a primary scorer on a good team, just not that good team, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've thought about the trade with him and CJ a lot. And like even now with him playing this well, and like even if you want to discount like CJ hurting his knee, like it's still I still don't think it was necessarily a bad trade for the Nuggets because when you look at, and I think MPJ alluded to this in some of his other comments, like he's so good at making shots that might not be, queued up for him, like within the offense that, Jokic or Murray can find him out of the pick and roll or whatever they're doing by all the attention they create. Whereas, but he's better. But Cam Johnson is more of a catch and shoot guy, and we saw Cam do a little bit that last year. But hopefully, you get what I'm getting at. But where he's more of like the guy where it's like, all right, you create the shot for me, and I'm going to finish the possession. Whereas if Michael Porter Jr. is in that position, you're not using his strengths to the max because more often than not, he's going to get open shots when you're playing in an offense with Nikola Jokic. Whereas with the Nets now, they can kind of tap into some of that those greens that he's just hitting, where guys are blanketed all over him. So I think, I mean, the Nuggets were my pick to win the finals out of the West, so I guess that's why they're I got a little bit of a soft spot for them, but I still think it was kind of a decent trade for Denver.
Well, it's I think Porter he was shifting to a different version of a player, which that kind of goes back to the maturity part, where he
Yeah,
was willing to, or at least seemed more willing to kind of morph into that role in Denver. But at the beginning, there were growing pains. Like he was expressing his frustration literally. He was, saying it in press conferences, social media, whatever the case may be, especially when Mike Malone was the coach. But I think, like you said, him playing to his actual strengths would have been a very congested style of basketball in Denver, with him and Jokic both kind of occupying similar parts of the floor. Where I think here, like you said, Cam Johnson he's more suited for that role. Where what he was doing here was kind of playing, I wouldn't say out of his skill set, but it wasn't a role he's ever carried in his career before. So I think that does make sense. I think for them, for Denver, they're kind of going through an odd transition where you mentioned them as a championship pick. I'm not sure if I would have said that. They're kind of a question mark. They're like on an even playing field with all the good teams in the NBA to me right now, which I'm not sure how that move would have helped them in that instance.
yeah. I mean, they did beat the Sixers with a bunch of back end guys at the bench last night. I was rather impressed by that. We'll see
That's a
though.
good point.
OKC's the favorite. I think when I said that, I was thinking like, what's a good like value pick? Where like,
Yeah.
do I want to plus 100 on OKC to win the finals? Like, what's the fun in that? But, you know,
That's true, and it's always good to see a new team in it, and just that. Well, I guess they're not necessarily a new team because they've won it before, but there's been enough of a separation. Or you wonder when a team like, but then you see another like championship caliber team like Milwaukee from a few years ago, and all of a sudden now it's like what's going on over there. So it's interesting how now it's not as repetitive as it was before.
yeah, no, very much so. So I know you had mentioned, All Star talk with Michael Porter Jr. and I've been thinking about this all week just because it's a similar kind of situation when D'Angelo Russell came to Brooklyn the first time. He was kind of shot off by the Lakers. They wanted to, Lonzo Ball and build that way. Came to Brooklyn, played better than anyone expected him to, was named an All Star. I personally see a lot of similarities what's going on with Michael Porter Jr. right now. I know the wins aren't there right now, but who would you rather have, or what were you more impressed by slash still impressed by now? Michael Porter Jr. in 2025, 26 this year, or D'Angelo Russell in 2018-19?
I would say in this instance, I'd rather have D'Angelo Russell from that time, but I'm more impressed by Michael Porter Jr. because I just didn't expect this. I think we kind of knew what D'Lo was capable of just because of how he was that number. I think the number 2 pick in the draft. He was great at Ohio State, so we knew what he was capable of. I think he was just kind of being held back or a product of whatever system he was in prior to that. But I think on a team like this, I mean, it's the most apparent thing that they're missing is a distributor, is that floor general, that electric offensive player. So it just yeah, it's I remember you saying that just kind of like brings me back seeing him on this team. I think it'd be really fun, but I do think going back to the expectations, just I didn't expect Porter to be such a complete player. So it has been a complete surprise to me. I expected this to be another version of like the Jordan Poole Washington Wizards type of team, and it hasn't been that at all. So
Yeah, and we shout him out on the show all the time, but want to shout out Jordy Fernandez for helping Michael Porter Jr. Because if you watch between how he's queuing up screens for him and cuts around the floor, and I'm sure some of it is just MPJ. He knows he can hit from anywhere and he's improvising out there, but a lot of it looks like design, sets to get him the ball in creative ways, even as guys try to throw two at him. I think the Nets coaching staff has done a tremendous job, getting him in these positions to shoot because defenses are cued into him right now, 110%. I do agree with you on the D'Angelo Russell side of it, where this team could really use a table setter right now. Like Terrence Mann was kind of who they were running the offense through in the beginning of the season, and I was like, love Terrence Mann's ferocity or tenacity for the game, but I don't think that's quite the role for him. So I think that version of D'Lo now would be great, but I think Michael Porter Jr. is having a better season, more of an all-star season than D'Lo was having that year. And I've always subscribed to the idea that wins are a team stat, not an individual stat. And I don't think guys should be punished in all-star voting because their team isn't good. The same way I don't think that guy should be, like Josh Hart is not an all-star. I'm sorry. He's
Yeah.
just, but some people are talking about that. Like I think Beggs wrote an article about it, but and I think that I'm a little bit different like that because I know sometimes guys do get in on the account of winning, but I think that's just old school basketball knowledge. Like I think it's an individual award. You should be rewarded for how you play as an individual. And if you look at the numbers, Michael Porter Jr. is averaging, I think, 25.9, 7 and 3. D'Lo that year, hold on, he averaged 21, 7 and 3. So similar, but Michael Porter Jr. scoring more. And D'Lo's true shooting that year was 53.3, whereas MPJ's this year is 6. It's in the 60s. So it's almost a 10 point. It might even be a 10-point jump. So I think yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm just really like blown away by it. And I think the all-star noise is not only warranted but well deserved. And I don't think he'll get it because, like I said, I think voters punish guys for being on bad teams, and wins are important. However, I think that they should be, the fifth or sixth thing you look at a guy versus, look at his points, look at his efficiency, look at his on-off numbers before all that stuff.
Well, I agree. I guess the All Star case is interesting because his scoring numbers are so impressive. But then you look at it, he's number 14 in the NBA with 25.9 points per game. That's a very impressive average. But then that goes into us saying how he's evolved into more of a complete player as well. So you also have other things to take into account, like those 7 rebounds per game as well. Definitely plays a role. I guess you kind of flip. You can't really flip that with D'Lo's 7 assists necessarily, but that supplements it for sure. I think in MPJ's case, the team playing bad obviously plays a role, but then you look into how many wins he's kind of willed the team into, where it's like he's just completely at least shooting them into being a factor, being
Yeah.
having a possibility to winning these games. And the few times that they do win, it's usually because of him or largely part of, and due to him. So I think he should be considered for an all-star. I think if he can climb up a couple spots, maybe creep into that top 10 in scoring, because they are pretty close to each other. It's like just a few decimal points separating everybody. If he can creep into that top 10, he'd have a better shot. And if the team can just win a couple more games, then obviously, that would also increase his odds.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it'll definitely be interesting to follow. I know the All-Star fan vote came out today. He did jump from 10 to 9, so there's been a little bit of progress. I believe there's a big something around like 200,000 gap between 9 to 8. So I don't know if he'll continue to climb, but he is top 10 in votes. So that's for all the talk Nets fans get for not having any fans. I think that's quite something.
Definitely. Well, you gotta support the guy who's who's making you turn on the TV. Which I mean, I guess besides the rookies, he's giving you something exciting to watch every night. Trying to see if he can keep putting up 30, 25, whatever the case is.
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely been fun watching him. Kind of the other reason the Nets have had, I don't want to say success, like they're still a lottery team, but a little bit more success has been their defense. They have a top 5 defensive rating since November 15th. Tyler, how much kind of stock are you putting into this? I know they kind of had an easier stretch in the schedule, but I don't know. I feel like I see the eye test and it still looks pretty damn impressive. What are you seeing? And yeah, again, how much stock are you putting into that rating?
I think there's a few factors. Obviously, the advantageous schedule, as of late helps out with that for sure. But obviously, Jordy's coaching. I think a well coached team is usually a team that performs well defensively. You don't see a team like that getting knifed up on the defensive end. So I think that that's something you got to include. But then also just a young team with a lot to prove is going to be a hungry team that just plays with a lot of effort. This is just outside of any type of strategy or schematic analysis here. This is just very simple things. These are young players who, if they can at least do one thing, if they're not making shots, if the shots aren't falling, if they're turning the ball over, they can at least play good defense. They can at least try on defense. And then you look at players like, they may not be rookies, but guys that are fighting to continue to be a part of this rebuild. They're also trying to prove themselves defensively if the shots aren't falling. So I think that has something to do with it as well. I mean, I think the schedule does help. Just the fact that this team's 5 of 10, but those things kind of go hand in hand. Playing good defense as a result of that. So, I think a lot of this team's real defensive struggles kind of come in transition off of turnovers. So that's kind of something you can give them a break for. But in terms of just straight up defense, they have impressed me for sure.
Yeah, I think the thing that I alluded to it, the eye test stuff though, but watching this team, how they're able to blitz and recover, like help in the gap, and then get back into their shooters. Like I've just been very impressed by the connectivity. For it's just became January. A lot of these guys are new. I feel like so many of those now. I know they have scouting reports, and how much should I help? How much can I sag off shooters? But so many of those things are still feel things based on where the pressure of the ball is, who can get to the rim, how much is the offense stretching out the defense. They just seem like it's five guys all together in one like cognitive mind, and that's something I've been very very impressed with. And I the deflections are going up. I don't know. I think I would almost argue that seeing how the defense stacks up when they start to play more important teams is just as impressive as, or just as a reason to turn on the TV as Michael Porter Jr. trying to get an all-star, trying to see the rookies come out of this. Because last year, Pooch and I discussed this often. It really felt like last year was the year of Jordy Fernandez, where he was kind of the brightest spot of the year, how he was able to really motivate these guys and will them into different wins. And this really just feels like another extension of that. So I know a lot of the attention's on the rookies right now and on PJ right now, rightfully so, but I think this defense is something special. And we'll get into this in a minute, but I had a friend text me today, like, what do you think about Trey Young? Because everyone's talking about him right now. He's the all-star who's likely to be on the move. I feel like the Nets have not made a move maybe since drafting Cam Thomas, but at least in the last 2-3 years where they haven't, whether it's acquiring a guy or drafting a guy, with the exception of maybe Michael Porter Jr., but even he has been decent on defense this year. They really have not gone after anyone who isn't a two-way player, who can't, you know, at least be like big and like help in the gap and make deflections. So I think this is a team that this year you're seeing as a defensive minded team, and they're building it to be a defensive minded team in the future as well.
I agree. I mean, I'm not sure how much I see him fitting in this team. I think that yeah, a lot of it has to do with coaching and this team just playing well together. It is encouraging when you look at a young team that obviously in terms of the standings isn't very encouraging, but for the long term aspect, a lot of these people are, at least you expect them to be around for a while. So if they're able to be at least capable from a defensive standpoint, you're going to expect them to start defending, developing on the offensive end and at least start to be competent, at some point. But you got guys like Drake Powell, like playing solid defense. Danny Wolf has been a better defender than I expected as well. Just looking at the actual, rookies themselves. So that is encouraging. A little bit surprising, obviously. But in terms of Trey Young, I mean, yeah, kind of going back to what you said, I don't think he fits this team's mold for a variety of reasons. I also think you drafted so many guards that you at least got to keep your stock in one of those guys to be your kind of facilitator of the future. So yeah, I don't really see that happening.
Who or what team is your pick for where he ends up? I've
What
thought about this all day. I don't even have an answer. I'm confident, and I'll tell you mine after. But he's in a tough situation. The Hawks aren't a tough. The Hawks learned how to win without him, so they're not going to get good packages back.
I don't know. Like It's interesting because you do see him going to a team that's like a piece away, or do it to a completely, or do a rebuilding team. I guess that's what it kind of comes down to because it's like I don't see him like I don't think a team like Miami would be interested in him or something like that. I can only see like another bottom tier team going after him and crossing their fingers.
Yeah, I mean, the team that I'm thinking in this is a bottom tier team, and just every move they've made has just screamed desperation to me. I think the Bucks are gonna unload whatever the hell they have left because they're so Giannis, please don't leave us, even though they've just put together a garbage team and have the most overrated coach, I think, in NBA history at the helm right now. And I don't even know if they're in the plane right now. They might be outside of it. And I think now, granted, I don't think Trey Young's going to solve any problems for the Bucks, but I think you can maybe talk yourself into like Giannis, Trey Young pick and roll, like inside outside action. But I think the most desperate team is going to go after him, and I think the most desperate team in the NBA right now is the Milwaukee Bucks. So that's my futures bet.
That's not a
Who knows?
terrible one. I think in terms of just trying to lure him to stay, you'd have to get a big whale. I guess he counts as a whale, but in that instance, I just don't know if he plays winning basketball. I'm not sure if it's really his fault necessarily. Like I don't watch him and think that he's not exhibiting effort or trying. It's just there's limitations there defensively, and I think in this league, guys like that get picked on.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I mean, it's not even just that. There's obviously like you'd have to build such a perfect team around him for them to win. Where you need a Giannis, you need another guy. So I Milwaukee's not a bad pick. I don't know. I was trying to think of like
I
Miami was really the only other team that I thought of just because they've been trying to move pieces around and they've kind of been rumored for, but I don't see him being part of that, that supposed heat culture, quote unquote. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I thought maybe the Rockets for a second with like Van Vliet and they kind of don't have like a point guard right now. But I just don't think he's an Ime Udoka guy, similar to why I don't think he's a Jordy guy. And also I know I believe Brett Siegel of Clutch Points said today that the Rockets, along with the Nets, have no interest in Trey Young. So I think those two are pretty unlikely.
Yeah, we'll see. I think he might be stranded in Atlanta for a bit if they're not going to get anything worthy for him. Then at that point, if you're talking about filling in seats, I mean, if he's gone, there's not really a point in watching that team. So if you can't get anything for him, that's gonna fill in seats or turn on TV. So they might just hold on to him for a while.
Yeah, yeah, definitely tough times in Atlanta. I think a lot of people, myself included, really thought that they would be able to make some noise in a week East this year between him and Porzingis and some of the other pieces they add, but they look like they might be headed back into a rebuild, and that's what the Nets know all about. So we're gonna get into the rookies here. I know talked a little bit about Danny Wolf, Yegor. I think I've seen some stuff on Nets Daily about Trey from you too, Tyler. From what you've seen so far, just to kind of close us out, give us your rookie ladder. If you could rank the rooks 1 through 5 right now,
Ooh.
we would love to hear it.
Um,
It's a tough task, I know.
yeah, yeah. I think we'll start. I'll start from the top. At the top, I still have Danny Wolf, but Jaegor's
Really?
kind of pulling him down from the leg because he's starting to show up with at least from beyond the arc. So we got Danny Wolf at 1, Jaegor at 2. I put Drake at 3. Drake is a pretty clear 3, and then 4, Nolan flipped with Ben. Nolan's shown me a little bit more, and then you got Ben at 5. I think the difference between Ben and all of these other guys, at least the other 4, they've all shown, while they've shown deficiencies, of course, they've at least shown why we were all so high on them. Why their potential is so exciting. Where in Ben's situation, it's just he came in as the most polished guy because he had the most professional experience, but he hasn't actually kind of stood out. They're obviously all going to have to go through a lot of development, but in his case, obviously there's been some like tic tac injuries. I think he was sick for a little bit, but I just don't really see in terms of development. We were talking about that previously. Uh, in Ben's situation, I don't see him being more than like a rotational minutes guy. Where you look at Drake Powell, that's somebody who can really develop into like a legit 3-and-D guy in the NBA. Danny Wolf, I mean, I don't even know what to say. Like he has that unicorn potential. he has kind of also impressed and shown up in ways that were questioned in terms of his transition from college to the NBA. Like defensively, he's not a liability. He's obviously not a great defender yet, but he's not somebody that gets picked on. He's not like a bullseye defensively. And then Yegor is the most confusing to me, obviously, because we expected this like facilitator, 6'9" point guard, you know, not unicorn, but a very unique player in that instant, in that realm. And then he's hasn't really been that guy. He hasn't been able to penetrate. He hasn't shown a comfort as a ball handler, but he's lights out from three. He's the second most 3-pointers among all rookies. So he's definitely really impressed. But I think Danny's number one just because I think his skill set, if you look at like all-star potential, surprisingly to me, I think he has, that written all over him compared to the other guys. I'm not sure how you feel like in that aspect. I think probably in terms of raw potential, I'd rank it, Danny 1, Drake 2, and then Yegor 3 probably.
Yeah. This is what makes it a tough assignment is that you can try to base it off what you've seen, but so much is still, what's this guy's potential? Like
Yeah.
I watched a lot of film on Drake Powell and I believe he can be a quality starter in this league. I'm not totally sure about the other guys. However, I would have Yegor 1 just because he's shooting the lights out. I feel like he just has the most highest consistent point production. And granted, he's the consistent starter, so that kind of makes sense. But regardless, you got to give credit where credit's due. I do think I was talking to some friends today, like, oh, the Nets drafted 3 point guards, and I was like, you think that because they said that when they drafted him, and that was the case.
Yeah.
Yegor was a point guard at BYU. However, if you watch the Nets this year, and anyone who watches the Nets would look at Yegor who didn't, even if you didn't know any better, you would say that he's a forward because he
Yeah.
plays like a forward. He's sized like a forward. They use him like a forward. So I do think that the point guard stuff we haven't quite seen yet, but the dude's 19. Maybe he eats his Wheaties, and a couple years from now we have a shooting forward with vision. Maybe he's not breaking down the defense at the top of the key, but that's still a solid player. So I kind of see the vision there. The scoring is there. The shooting has been pretty tremendous, honestly, compared to what we thought it would be with, how we shot the ball in college. So I would have him as 1. I think Saraf just has to be 5 just because, he's been in the G. I think the 3 in the middle, though, that those are flip flopping like every day. I know Danny Wolf hasn't had the best shooting stretch. However, I think so much of the NBA today now is how can I attack a defense in different ways with different lineups? And Danny Wolf is a guy that you can do that in so many different ways. So I think he's super valuable. Would like to see better finishing at the rim. Hopefully the 3 point shot comes back. Um, so I'm gonna put him at 3. I'm gonna put Drake at 2, even though we haven't seen a whole lot of Drake. I just love his game for the modern game. He's got lateral quickness. He can really score from anywhere. Turning it over a little bit too much, but he's a rookie. What the hell? And then Traore, yeah, I'll stick him at 4 just because the speed has been on display. He had a rough game against the Houston Washington. I think Jordy wasn't too happy about some of his tendencies on the court. Not that that's a big deal, but also been kind of up and down like Wolf from him. But I like his speed, and I don't know about his athletic skills because I still question his ability to put pressure on the rim. But there's something there. And, these guys are all different, and I think that's kind of the strength in them. That it is a different skill set. You can use them in different ways.
Yeah, I think in that instance, like you said, they may all have the same positional tag, but they're such different players. Like, especially when you see Yegor having developed as a shooter, they honestly lack similarities. And I think in Nolan's case, something to be encouraged about was when he was in France playing at St. Quentin. He did terrible his first like 10 games. I think his first game he was like 2 for 12, turned the ball over a ton. And then his coach just, kind of praised him for his ability to adapt and, be inquisitive, kind of never put his head down, always keep his head up, stay positive. And by the end of the year, he was voted the league's best young player, which is, I guess, their version of rookie of the year. So when you look at him getting off to a rough start, his first couple of weeks in the G League were rough. Like he was throwing passes into the stands. Even not, we're not talking NBA, just G League. He looked like a
Yeah.
fish out of water. But even now, he's at least like he wasn't really even capable of stepping on an NBA floor at that point, like to the
Yeah.
point where it probably would have been embarrassing. But now we see him at least able to get minutes and not like make a fool out of himself. And we, like you said, you see the speed is there. And I think it's also just comes down to a willingness to improve. And we kind of see that from all of these guys. I think Danny Wolf's another guy who I just don't think is going to let himself be a bad basketball player, let himself not improve on, some of his deficiencies. So I mean, I don't know about you just in terms of like off the floor things as, being able to cover the team, having spoken to these guys. I am impressed by their character as well. Like for 19, 20-year olds, like we're young guys, they're younger than us, and they seem to be, pretty mature individuals.
Yeah, that's definitely, I'm glad you brought that up. That's definitely something I've noticed this past week. Like I mentioned that Jordy, mentioned about how Nolan wasn't, touching the paint enough. He challenged Jaegor like a week and a half ago. He responded well. I think he challenged Drake defensively. These guys have shown that they're, all the crap that NBA players get today from some of the older fans who are like, "Oh, these guys are all prima donnas." Those people should come and watch the Brooklyn Nets and hear their coach talk about his players and how his players respond, because they have absolutely shown that they're coachable players. They like to get coached, and they want to get better, and they've shown that they are excited to get better, and that they will get better.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to having a coach that like genuinely cares about your development. I think Jordy, he may be a tough love guy, but like there's a reason there's two words in that phrase. It's tough love. He shows these guys a lot of praise when they're doing well. He has no problem doing that. He's not just gonna like, kind of crawl into his show and you ask him, Nolan had a great game today. How do you feel about it? He will, you know, show love to these guys, and I think they need to hear that. They need to hear what they're capable of and kind of be reminded of it at times as well as being corrected.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You're right. He definitely does dish the love out when it's doing it. I think that means a lot more than, you don't want a coach who just says good job every game. It's going to mean something when the coach says good job after, he was like, hey, what the hell were you doing out there, the day before. So I think he's definitely building a good psyche in the locker room for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, these guys aren't they're not watching their highlight tapes every day. They're watching film. They're watching themselves miss shots. We think that they walk around with, this positive image of themselves, but they're also very aware of what they're struggling at. So you need somebody to pour into you, and I think he's the perfect coach for this group of guys right now.
Yeah, I definitely do too. All right. Tyler, thanks for hopping on, man. It was great to have you on here. We're hopefully going to get you back on sooner, get you out to some more Nets games. We love what you're doing for us at Nets Daily. Let the good people know where they can find you, man.
Awesome, man. Again, happy to be on. I really appreciate it. You can find me on Tyler Carmona, which is my full name pretty much on all of the social medias. I got, X, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff.
Sounds good, guys. Make sure to check Tyler out on all social platforms. Check him out on Nets Daily. We're going to be back in 2 weeks. We'll be getting closer, not close, but closer to the trade deadline. So hopefully we'll have some new rumors to talk about. We'll look to get on some guests, provide some inside information, all that good stuff. But in the meantime, if you want to follow us, we're the Brooklyn Pod on X, Instagram, TikTok. If you want to reach out, you got a question, you want to, just shoot the shit with us, you can reach us at thebrooklynpod@gmail.com. Thanks for stopping in, everyone, and we will see you next time. Go Nets.